Our next guest today is the game director at Shatter, James Parker. Welcome.
Hello, thank you very much.
Welcome, James. James, you've been around for some time.
Yes.
So 20 years or something?
25 years.
25 years. It's like Slytherin. Slytherin is 25 years old, so you're celebrating the anniversary with us. James, you've been working over the last few years now on a series of games that captured my imagination, a lot of people's imagination, which is called Fights in Tight Spaces, which in the first place I find fascinating because the title says exactly what the game is, which is very rare for strategy games. Can you tell us how did it come about? How did it happen? What was the idea behind it? And
yeah, the title was almost one of the earliest things that we had. The intent was to create this game that was about what it felt like to be a cool action hero and improvising with this environment. And we didn't want to make a shooter or a brawler or something. We wanted to do something that captured the essence of it, but wasn't necessarily an arcade title. It was very different to the things we'd done before, and we just wanted to play around with different game mechanics and see what we could do.
And there's a number of elements here. So the space is one thing, and did you start from that limited space and then we'll make a turn-based strategy game on it?
Yeah. So the real starting point was I wanted to do a game that was that thing that is a trope of action movies where the hero gets thrown into the back of a car or the back of a van or something and has a fight with his enemies in that really close quarters. And we broadened it out a little bit into the kind of bathrooms and corridors and things that you see in the final game. But we always wanted to make the confinement a integral part of the experience.
What I find interesting also is that then you've got this system, so it's the fight, and then you've got a turn-based system and so on, and then you've added the layer of the cards, the deck building layer. Again, coming back to this idea of we are making games that try to mix different genre. How did you put the two together?
Well, the cards weren't there from day one. They were introduced later, but they were the thing that really kind of caused that cascade of thinking, oh, actually, this game can work now. Because the way you're dealt your cards, it represents that thing where you are the hero and you're improvising in the situation you find yourself in. So you have the setup of the enemies and in the level, but then you have this set of moves and actions that you can perform, and you can't always dictate what that's going to be. And so the fantasy of it is you're improvising your way out of these tough corners, and the deck mechanics really helped us lean into that.
As a designer, first and foremost, how do you? I'm super interested in understanding how, there's the strategic element of the deck building and such, and then you're also, because you're fighting in tight spaces, you're also developing in tight spaces, as in you've got a lot of limitations in how many things you can do in the development process. How do you play with these limitations? It's an exercise for game designers, right? Playing within your limitations.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are other things that we added in that kind of further limited us, in the sense that I wanted every action to be card-based rather than have a separate pool of movement points, for example.
Okay.
So your movement cards are also cards. They use the same momentum as your actions and your attacks. But it was things like that really, it's a nice challenge as a designer, as you say, to have limitations, but also it means that every small change that we made subsequent to that had ripple effects throughout the whole game, and that's again, both exciting and a challenge. But the benefit of that is that you can do a lot with very little. You can make small changes here, and they affect lots of different things here. And the player has that same ability if they pick certain cards, if they set up their deck in certain ways, then it enables them to approach the game in ways that we didn't even imagine.
Yeah, that's an interesting because I think one of the coolest thing about fights in tight spaces is that it's like every single scenario is kind of playing very differently, right? And I mean, you're not a huge team, how do you balance, like, you've got a design, you've got a scenario design, how is scenario design important to this game? How much is it important, and how did you tackle to make sure that every scenario was original, different?
Yeah, I think most of that comes through mostly through careful planning of the difficulty curve as well as the progress through the game. So it's making sure that you're constantly affording the player new opportunities, but then you're also giving them new challenges. So we have enemies that come in at different stages of the game that can potentially confound your starter deck. So you're forced to evolve your play style as you play through a single run of the game, but also as you play through multiple runs of the game, you're aware of what's coming up later. So as a player, you get better as well.
Sorry. The idea of making a game that is evolving, but also giving the power to the players to sort of decide, further down the line, you've got to confront with the fact that players may have taken decisions that are not fitting with that scenario. Is that a problem you encountered?
I don't think so, because I think we've done quite a good job of making sure that if a player loses, by and large, it's as a consequence of their choices.
Okay.
And sometimes the random numbers will just get you. You're dealing a set of cards from a deck. There's always going to be randomness there and in spawns and things, but we try and give players the facilities to get out of those situations as often as possible. And during development, people would go, oh, look at this, it's impossible. And I'd say, it's not impossible because you can do this and this and this, and then you're out of that situation. So creating challenges which look potentially overwhelming, but actually there are ways through, is quite a nice place to find ourselves.
Did you have to become very, very good at playing the game?
I'm certainly not the best at playing this game. There are players on our Discord who do absolutely insane things with the deck building to deal millions of damage in a single punch, and very exciting things that I can't even comprehend.
That's great. So after this, I think Fights got like 2 DLCs and a surprise DLC this month, right?
There's a DLC that just came out on Monday, Frights in Tight Spaces, which the player finds themselves in a haunted mansion run by occultists, and there's lots of exciting traps and spooky goings on for people to enjoy.
That's great. And in the meantime, though, you also released another game, which, I don't know, again, the natural evolution that no one was expecting, Knights in Tight Spaces. So you moved to a completely different setting, moved to completely different, I guess, mechanics as well, in how the game evolves and so on. Tell us a bit about that, and how you sort of decided that growing the game not only from a setting perspective but also from a experience perspective was the decision you made. Yeah,
for Knights it was interesting. There was various mechanics that we'd either prototyped or considered while we were developing Fights, which felt a bit like unfinished business. We had this pool of things that we wanted to try out that we thought had potential, and one of those was the party system, where the player could control multiple characters all at once, which then lent itself very well to the setting of a kind of tabletop RPG, D&D style party. So those fitted in nicely, so we wanted to lean into that side of things. So that helped influence the setting as well as allow us to expand the mechanics.
But Knights is a lot more, right? There's more narrative. It's more like RPG, can we say, right?
Yeah, very light RPG. We have inventories and equipments and player classes and such like, and that's again, that's part of the trappings of what we wanted to achieve with Knights.
The idea of making a game that was kind of keeping the same core system of I know what I'm expecting, but growing it massively in sort of around the different other elements around the game. Do you think that that attracted more players? Do you think that it catered to the same audience that was looking for more but more articulated?
Yeah, I think there was definitely a spectrum of players who enjoyed the first game, who came along for the ride, enjoyed Knights as well, enjoyed those different aspects we added on because it has those added layers of complexity. It's a much longer form game, I suppose. Play sessions are a bit longer, the campaign's a bit longer, so you don't have that quite as much of that endless replayability as Fights provides. So they definitely cater to ever so slightly different groups, but we've had players play Fights and then play Knights and enjoy them both. We've had people see Knights for the first time, then be introduced to the mechanics of the game and then pick up Fights subsequently. So yeah, there's definitely a pollination of players between the two.
Yeah, I guess that I would be really curious. I don't know if we will never know, but to know if that there are actually two audiences for these two games, and some of them are just the same, or it's like just one big audience that may be interested in just either the two of them or just one.
Yeah, I think there's possibly less of a big natural crossover than I thought. I think there is. It's one is not a superset of the other. There is a bit more. There are some people who definitely prefer one to the other, whereas I had perhaps assumed that more people would just see it as all part of one continuum.
Yeah. You were not building a sequel, as it were. You were just building a.
No, it was very much a spin-off. It was we were so at the end of Fights with the mechanics that we developed and the systems that we developed were so well honed that it felt a real shame not to make use of those again.
Yeah.
So, and because we had these other ideas that we wanted to do, and it gave us the opportunity to pick up a different art style, it was just a really natural thing to do, was to do something a little bit outside of a direct sequel.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great game, great gameplay, but also both Knights and Fights have a very distinct art style. It's not always the case that in games you have maybe great gameplay but generic art style, just great art style but not great game. So huge kudos to you guys and how you sort of managed to come up with a cool art style for both. What's the process there? What was the start for Fights, I guess? Where did you start from and how did you get there, and say for Knights?
Yeah, when we did the initial previs of Fights, it was much more realistic, much more akin to the artwork that we'd been using before. But we felt that it needed something that would give us the clarity that was needed for what was, potentially a bit of a new genre mashup, like to have the turn-based tactics and the deck building at the same time. We didn't want too much clutter, and I think having a clear visual style for the characters and the levels definitely helped with that. And it really helped from a marketing perspective because it was very iconic in its look, and people would see it, recognize it. And it made people sit up a bit, I think.
Well, what's on Knights, I think it's an interesting one because you look at Knights and you look at close, and there is a very, very cool art style, but it's much harder to sort of see it from the distance, I guess.
Yeah, it doesn't have that same immediacy, but I think if we'd married the original visual style with Knights, it wouldn't have sat very well. We've gone for a much more sort of European comic book look, I suppose, and that's with dark blacks and hard outlines, but a bit more colour and a bit more texture and a bit more grit to the world, I suppose.
Yeah,
and I think that much better suited the setting.
Also the fact that because you probably need more detail to do a lot of the things that you're doing, like inventory and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
and with multiple player characters and multiple enemy types and all of those different things going on, then yes, having slightly more to distinguish them than just a silhouette outline.
That's great. That's great. The challenge for games like these is that it's once players have played the thing, they think they're done with it, so they very seldom move to. But you manage to sort of keep the audience attached to it for quite some time now. So, is there a way you did it? Was it intentional that you wanted to create something that people were still playing after a long time?
Yeah, that was definitely a goal of ours. You never know whether you're going to achieve that or not, but we've definitely seen players stick with the game for a long time and keep playing it on a regular basis. And I think that's partly down to the level of challenge that's there. The default game mode difficulty, you still have to spend some time working with the game in order to progress.
Yeah.
So and then we have added additional harder difficulties. There's achievements to get. There's all the usual things that you can do, but because of the deck building elements of it, there's lots of opportunities for players to kind of create their own challenges. They will build decks of certain types outside of the starter decks that we've offered them through Deck Draft or whatever, and that giving the players the ability to create their own challenges is great for longevity and is good for players as well.
Do you think you cater a lot to the deck building market? Because what I'm thinking is that the deck building genre, other than the fact that it's, I think, saturated, but that's another subject. It's very, all the games are very similar in terms of not in how they look, but the display of things and detail and all that kind of stuff. I think Fights is probably if you take it from a deck building perspective, it's probably something that's no competition, right? In terms of how there's a 3D representation of the decks and cards and everything. Do you see that? Do you think that's like from on that genre that you're something that is really different and new?
Yeah, we're definitely an outlier. I think we probably appeal to a slightly different audience to the pure deck builder fans, but that was our intention. I think the goal was to bring in people who wouldn't necessarily play a game like Slay the Spire, and we wrapped up elements of that. We used some of those mechanics to create something that is action-packed and visually exciting and has really cool animations, and just the presentational aspects of it hopefully attract a wider audience to what is a really cool and interesting way of playing games.
What I think is a big success in Fights is that, going back to this idea of mixing genre and being hybrid games and that kind of stuff, is that Fights is not really fitting into any genre, is it? Where would you fit it?
No, I always describe it as a turn-based deck building fighting game where you slam people's heads into things. It sort of encompasses a bunch of things. Yeah, there's other games that have done similar things in similar ways or in different ways, and I'm always excited to see the way other developers approach the same problems that we had throughout developing these systems, because there's many of them, and there's definitely different ways to approach it to the way we have done so.
Congratulations on. Can you tell us what's coming next?
I can't.
Not if you more beer, no.
Yeah, I'm sure that is in my future.
James, thanks for joining us. It's just fascinating what you've been doing. Before I leave you, I've got the 5 questions for you.
I'm ready.
I hope that I won't. You can say no to any of these, but we'll shoot you. Ready?
Yeah,
3,
ready.
2, 1. What popular character would you like to see fighting in tight spaces?
Garfield. I panicked, I'm going to be honest.
Okay, Garfield. Okay, that's a nice one. One thing you love about making games?
The people.
The people.
I'm immensely proud of my team, and it's always a pleasure to go into work and work with excellent people.
Do you have a favorite game to play on the go?
I am dangerously addicted to Marvel Snap, so
Wow,
I play that
okay.
on everywhere I go.
Is there a thing you hate about making games?
That I'm not just able to do it without having to every 2 years ask people for lots of money.
Okay. 25 years in the industry, give us one lesson you want to deliver.
Pick your battles. Not everything has to be an argument. You can collaborate as much as you can fight one another.
Thank you for joining us, James. It was a pleasure.